I wonder, Mr. Connor, if you could speak a little bit more about what the process for removing books and what that looks like in transparency for the community when books are removed, and how we can access that information.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do keep record of that, and we are taking more specific record of that as of late with new legislation and new policy about how we weed and deselect materials, and that is publicly available material upon request. So when we deselect books, so we average, roughly, and I'm giving you very rough numbers, estimates, 2% of our collection on an annual basis, right? And then we refresh that with new titles, whether that be 1 or 2% on an annual basis. So there's a constant recirculation and a refreshing of materials. But the main thing in terms of our media techs at our school sites, they are looking at the process of what books may be damaged, they may need to be deselected or weeded from there, or they haven't been circulated in several years. So in order to refresh that, they're looking at what may need to be removed. When it comes to age appropriateness, we do have district media specialists. We have 3 of them throughout that work throughout the county in regional capacities. But when we decide whether we're going to deselect a material because of age appropriateness, those will convene together, and there's a process involved in deselecting that material. So I'm going to hand it over to Ms. O'Day and the team to talk a little bit about that process. In terms of our current titles, we have several titles that may have been deselected for certain grade levels, so it may not be necessarily appropriate for K1 and 2, but may be appropriate for 3, 4, and 5. And so that would show up on a report as being weeded for age appropriateness, even though that title may still be in circulation for other grade levels. So there is a little bit of a caveat that if you look at it just in black and white, you may think that a title has been completely removed for age appropriateness, and that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, so to piggyback on what you said, because you did cover that pretty well, I don't want to restate what he said. The only other caveat would be like moving the grade bands up and down because of age appropriateness, or if it becomes adult content in nature, because at times when you're looking at age appropriate, sometimes it is content age appropriate, but we're finding the adult content in that process as well, and if it deemed is adult content, we don't teach adults, we teach children, so it is moved right on out of our library circulation, and that is usually because of pornographic in nature and sexual content that can't be in there, or things about drugs and suicide. Those are just some of the more popular things that come up when we code something adult content. Mr. Prento, did you want to add, did I miss anything, or Mr. Connor?
No, the only thing that I would add is that the district media specialists, as they're trained through the Florida Department of Education, that age appropriateness is a part of that training. They also have resources that they use where they can reference and look at what the recommended age ranges are for these materials. And when we're deeming something age appropriate, it's based on the content of the material, not the complexity of the text. So if a certain material is a complex text, might be available for a higher level reader, but the content of it is not age appropriate, our district media specialists are making recommendations on alternative texts that have similar complexity for those students that may be higher level readers. And if a material is not age appropriate at one elementary school because it's K2, you may see it removed from there, then the barcode is changed and it's added back into circulation at that school. And as we look at other schools throughout the district, it may not be available at any other school in K2, so it wouldn't be showing up on the report as even looked into at a different elementary school or similar grade level school. So those books can be added back in, and we want to make sure that now that we do have the new platform for tracking all of this, that we have as many available touch points of finding out how this goes and if it moved, where it moved, and be able to track all of that information.
Ms. Barger?
Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it. And I think the second part of my thought process was, how are we communicating if a book is deemed not age appropriate, even if it's just for K through 2, how are we communicating that to our library techs and our parents? Because, the message that we've been giving the community is we don't have any banned books in Sarasota, right? but perhaps there are some books that we internally have decided are not age appropriate, right? But so how are we communicating that information?
So we do have within our policy that if a book is deemed not age appropriate for certain grade levels, that the district media specialists communicate that to the schools, to their media techs, and to the school principals, so that that can be communicated out as well. It would also flag within the CHOUT system if by chance that book is still there and accessible at certain grade levels, or a student walks over to a different portion of that media center and goes to check out that material. As they go through that process, it would flag. There's also a notification that goes out to parents every time their student checks out a book. So they get that opportunity to see what their children are checking out. And if they see a title or something that they look into and they deem that they don't feel that's appropriate for their child, they have the tools available to them to have that material not be available to their student. And that would be in their student's file for when they go to check out a book, that if it's something similar or a specific title, that they would not be able to.
Yep, and then let me add into the banned book. There are no banned books in Sarasota. Banning really refers to a unilateral decision. I don't like this book, it's banned, and I'm taking it away. We have a process that's rooted in our policy and procedure and aligned to the state's expectations for how we're reviewing our library media circulation. And again, if it's deemed adult content, it's deselected as a part of that process. But we don't ban books. We deselect them based on the categories that you guys have seen as far as the deselection process, and we added in the age appropriateness, because that is what we do in procedure, because that is the expectation of the state. It just wasn't listed there, and so that was part of that policy change. Not that it's different from practice, but it's reflecting more transparently how we deselect books. But we have not banned any books in Sarasota.
Ms. Marinelli?
Yes, thank you. Could you just give the definition that is used by our district of what age appropriate means? And then are the school personnel trained so everyone is saying the same thing of what age appropriateness is? And how's that communicated to parents so we all know what is the definition that's being used for age appropriate?
Yeah, we absolutely do have that. It is based on Florida statute, so I'll give Mr. Parento just a second if you want to pull that up, and we could say it verbatim what that means. But we are very clearly, and that's why we put that specifically in this policy, that if deemed not age appropriate as defined by Florida statute, that covers that definition. In the event that may change, right? You know, statutes change on a year-to-year basis. And so are you ready to go ahead and share that?
So the definition is within Florida Statute 39.4091, and age appropriate is defined as activities or items that are generally accepted as suitable for children of the same chronological age or level of maturity. Age appropriateness is based on the development of cognitive, emotional, physical, and behavioral capacity that is typical for an age or age group. So that is the definition and direction that is given to our district media specialists from the Florida Department of Education through their training and certification. And it's also why we want to make that, why we have made that a group decision instead of an individual decision that could be different in North County than South County if it's a different district media specialist that's looking through that.
Mr. Parento, just let me add too, in other policies in our district, when a parent is utilizing their rights to say they want to opt in or opt out of a text that's being read aloud in a classroom, that's also listed in our policy, that it has to meet the criteria if they want something reviewed that's required instruction, or if the reasoning on why they don't want their child exposed to that. So it filters everywhere, not just in the library media circulation, but then texts and resources that we're using in the classroom to deliver instruction. So it's listed there as well in our policy. If you didn't want to look up the statute, we actually do outline it there.
Mr. Edwards? So I think what we all just heard is that that definition is still highly regarded as subjective. And what concerns me, because I've been down this road probably about 2 years ago, where we had opt out, and I asked if we could have, for lots of parents that had contacted me, I want my child to opt into everything. I want them to be able to read everything. I want them to hear everything. And I was told legally that that wasn't possible. So I'm asking that question again. And the second thing is, I think because there are parents that that perceive that things that are controversial, things that some parents might find objectionable, they don't. And why does somebody get to decide that for my child? I think we should, at a minimum, make those titles transparent for everybody. That these books, and to use your word, deemed inappropriate, is that, yeah, deemed inappropriate versus banned. Right. You know, I want to stay on the same language. That we should have a very transparent list of books by age that were deemed inappropriate so that parents can make those decisions for their children otherwise.
Ms. Ziegler?
Thank you. I love this conversation. That was really wonderful to really, after 2 years of state legislation, lots of dynamic discussion at the community level, but then to see from the policymaking standpoint where we've landed. I applaud all of you because I know there's been a lot of work behind that. And I would agree. Listen, if there are any books that have been relocated, I'm not sure if a coding standpoint, if we can't remember what the other word was, I didn't write it down, but where we don't want to misconstrue that it's been actually removed, maybe it was removed. Instead, it could be replaced, or I don't know, something like that. So it's clearly not out of our circulation, but it was replaced based on grade, maturity, lexile. So, but and any ones that were removed, I think that I don't think there's any reason why it wouldn't be public or whatever. There's a very thorough process. I will say the reason that I believe you had to read that statute is, and to Mr. Edwards' point, yeah, it is very, I think there's a lot of subjectivity to it, and that's the challenge. But I believe the professionals in this district are able to find it, follow through with it, because I don't think it's that new by way of concept. But at the same token, when they made that language, I think it took something like 3 weeks just for that. So I think that the whole point was certainly empowering families to get involved, but also to create guidelines. And then if anything is in fact removed through that very thorough process, I don't think there's any reason to put it out there. At the end of the day, there's going to be opinions on all sides for whatever it is, and I don't think there's any benefit from, if people want to find it, they're going to find it. So let's make it available. But thank you, because otherwise that's a fantastic process.
Superintendent Connor?
Yeah. Just taking that feedback, we'll continue to refine this process. I think as we've gone through this iteration and with new legislation and understanding what our requirements too are under that new legislation and policy, our processes continue to get refined, they improve. And so I think we can do an even better job in making sure that that's all transparent and accurate, because what I do fear in the current report that's out there is that it may even look like it's weeded and it's completely gone out of the circulation. So we want to make sure that anything we put out there reflects what truly is happening and not misconstrued in any way. So we'll continue to work through that process.
Mr. Edwards?
Yeah, I would just add one last thing to that, if we're really trying to balance the scales here. I had noticed, and I've had several conversations with the superintendent in my one-on-ones about self-censoring. So what concerns me about the subjectivity is that sometimes people think, oh, this is kind of on the border, and I don't want the controversy, I don't want the headache, I don't want so I'm going to move it. That's why I think it should be transparent. But just as we have the process to remove a book for the public, I think there should be the process that I want the book put back in circulation. It should be equal. So if somebody finds that we removed a book objectionable, they should be able to argue it if they want. No, if it's already been removed because it's deselected, it didn't go through the banning process. So I'm just trying to make sure that it's a level playing field.
Okay, a few things. So you had initially said the opt-in, opt-out, and making sure that was clear. So opt-in, opt-out is for the required instruction. I want to make it clear that required instruction by the state, there is no opting in or opting out. That is required instruction that we're expected to deliver if the child is in attendance at school. It's when we have supplemental materials that may come into play to enhance the instructional unit. So it could be a speaker, it could be a field trip, it could be a text, a video clip that has to be communicated transparently that that's what's going to be shown. And a parent does have the opportunity to say, I want my child in or out of that, which doesn't impact other children. As far as books that have been deselected and, we're saying they're no longer available, especially in the adult content lane, even if a parent wanted their child to read, I'm going to give an example, Son of a Witch, which has lots of things in it. It's a mature perspective on the story of Wicked from The Wizard of Oz, but takes it in a whole different direction. There's rape, there's drugs, there's a lot of things in there that can be read, but not being offered at our school sites. So we wouldn't even say, even if you want your child to read it, we can direct you to the public library and other things, but we wouldn't offer that. So, saying that if we've deselected it, we want to opt into that, we would still not provide it because based on the deselection criteria and the state criteria, we have to follow that, and that's where we stand. So we wouldn't re-offer that even if a parent wanted it. But content-wise, just to point out to there's 43 titles that were deemed not age appropriate, which is something that Ms. Barker had brought to the attention of the superintendent. As we've been reviewing that, we've categorized some things in here just as far as the process and how we're coding, because there's different drop downs. There's definitely human error in here because there's little things that are just, it may have been deselected, but it's definitely not for age appropriateness because it's not demonstrating that, but there must have been something else as far as it's just not being read because the book's from 1965. It was damaged. We have multiple copies. There's a lot of other reasons, so we know what direction we want to go in with our library media specialists district-wide and our aides and making sure that they're handling those nuances and going slow because it does raise concern that may be creating concern that we don't need. And then even looking at the content here, none of this is content sensitive. There's a lot of fantasy and sci-fi and things that aren't really, going in the direction of, I feel like we're censoring that content because it's a controversial topic. And then the other titles in here, there are definitely adult content. There's pornographic in nature, or there's stuff explicitly about suicide and drug use and things that we can't expose based on our criteria. So we do have a detailed breakdown of that, which we can go over in one-on-ones next week and really explain what we found, what are some things that are in question that we feel are more, human error because we can't quite understand why it was deselected, and then even did a deeper dive on if it was deselected based on age appropriateness, did it get recategorized? And there are recategorizations. So it shouldn't have been in third, but now it's in fifth, or it shouldn't have been in fifth, and now it's in seventh. So we're able to do some cross-referencing just based on the perception that this report was giving, but then also guidance on how to create a more detailed report so that it's not confusing, slowing down so we can eliminate that human error, and then we absolutely can generate a master list of deselection, but what we have to make sure is that it's categorized properly, or we're just kind of chasing our tail on understanding it. So just want you to know that a lot of great questions. We've dug deeper on it with the team, and we'll continue to get better at our process so we can be as transparent as possible.
Yeah, I wasn't really suggesting anything around adult content. My biggest concern, I've seen it happen. I've been in conversations where people said, quite frankly, that could be controversial, and I'm just not going to do that. And I've seen teachers deselect things in their own personal libraries, if even get rid of their own personal libraries. So it's those kinds of things that as the pendulum is swinging back to the center, I want, and from my perspective also, I don't think it's all that many books, because I did spend a lot of time with the superintendent going over that list and talking about it, so I'm familiar with what you're talking about. So I think you're probably talking, if I had to take a really good guess, I think you're talking about 25 books that might fall into that sort of gray category. And that's the place that if we are proud of the fact that we haven't banned a book, then we're proud of the fact that if it's a close call, we're also making that transparent to the public so that the parents can make their own call. I think that that's the kind of place that I'm looking to get to.
Ms. Ziegler?
I really have to say how much I'm enjoying just hearing this process, because what I think there's been a disconnect, and I think all well-intentioned, because I've heard us talk about variety of different topics or situations that I think there's a lot of a common sense approach in a lot of these situations. And years ago, at least in our district, we had vetting processes, but it was not uniform, and it certainly wasn't written down. I mean, we had a workshop here, and the person who oversaw that was, quite frankly, was unable to say what it is across the board when we talk about instructional material, particularly media. And there is a sensitivity to making sure that pendulum doesn't go from one extreme to the other. And I think this whole process has really benefited the district, and I say that's why. And I think Mr. Connor mentioned we're fine-tuning it. We didn't have a process at all before. And then it was actually vetting it and aligning it to the state. And now it's going through, to your point, of making sure, because we understand the emotion behind this topic, not wanting to give, there's nothing that would preclude us from wanting to be transparent. It's making sure that it's accurate. But, and I hope that the community, when they see it, that I think it actually will probably alleviate a lot more things than the unknown, because I think that whenever this goes through, people being able to evaluate why it was pulled for what reason, it is in fact a very common sense unifying kind of component. And so, and then to the point of that, but we'll be transparent maybe, and there are families that are like, I definitely want my child to read it, and we'll be able to highlight it, and they can walk over to the public library or whatever and get that. And I think that, but again, I think the transparency piece is certainly standing behind a lot of the work that you guys are doing, that I know that will very much be supported, even as transparently as possible. So thank you.
Ms. Parker?
So yes, thank you so much, and thank you everyone. And actually, Mr. Edwards, you said beautifully, I think, what I was trying to communicate, which was that I want to make sure that our media techs, that our teachers, that everyone feels very confident that they know exactly what is or isn't allowed, and that they know the process. If they're on the fence about something, that they can go to these 3 district media specialists and really hash out whether or not this is a book that should be in circulation, going to make the wrong decision and somehow be in trouble. So I love that. And then the other thing, just to throw out there, is that I was in Tallahassee over spring break, and I actually spoke with Representative Bankson, who has legislation out there to change the definition again of what is appropriate. So I anticipate that we will have this conversation again at some point. So.
Which perfectly goes with why we put that in. We just let the statute lead the policy. I just want to, just for the sake of any of our teachers, any of our staff and administrators who may watch this workshop, is to reassure them we do not want to live in a self-censoring environment. We want people to feel comfortable about the decisions they're making. We want them to select materials and almost err on the side of caution of removing a book before you just rip it off the shelf, right? And so, thank you, Ms. Barker. We have plenty of professionals that are working in this specific area to help any of our teachers, any of our administrators with any of those tough conversations or questionable calls, or it's on the fence, we don't know. So please rely on that, reach out to us. But I would say err on the side of caution of not removing the book until you've gone through that process. Because we do, some things are very black and white. We can make the call and say that's not age appropriate, and then those close calls, reach out to someone and we'll be glad to help you. But here in Sarasota, I don't want our teachers to feel like they need to remove things off the shelf because they're in fear for their job or they're in fear that something bad's going to happen to them. No one wants to work in an environment like that. So know that we're here to support you and we'll help you make those tough decisions if they come about. We want plenty of books on our shelves.
Ms. Marinelli?
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Connor, thank you for making that clear, because, like 2 years ago, when this 2.5 years all blew, teachers took their own books off of their classroom, and that was not something that the board said, and that was before you even arrived, and that just caused such a emotional upheaval with our teachers, because they were told by, I think, the previous superintendent that one of them that everything was to come off their shelves until it could be cataloged. And we've been dealing with that ever since. So I appreciate this process. And, you know, because of the fact that I was at an elementary school and we had parents always object to some books. The last one was all the Harry Potter things because, and you know, those were not taken off the shelves because those were very important. And I think it's critical for children to know the difference between fantasy and real life and what's appropriate and not. But I don't want to get in the business of censoring, and I just want to make sure that everybody is trained, and that when a book is deemed not age appropriate, that it's following all, because I don't even understand the years that I was not working anymore, how some of these books even ended up in our media center, because they never used to be in the media center. So that's my question too, and I don't think anybody can answer it, but how did these books get in there? Because they never were before. We always used age appropriate, but it never had to raise to the level it does today. So I just want to make sure that everybody knows what the rules are and everybody follows them, so we don't have all these upheavals. And if a parent wants their child to read something, I'm glad you stated that you can direct them to the public library, or if they want to purchase a book, Amazon, wherever, Barnes and Noble, but that at school we're age appropriate and we're an instructional environment. So thank you.
Ms. Ziegler?
I know I want to be tight on time, but I just want to make sure that I truly believe that when we're talking about those are very extreme outliers, that because I feel that there's a counter argument of, well, if we start pulling those, that's not available to go to the public library, or they don't have the money to go there. And I'm saying, so I'm saying, like, yes, let's put this public, because I think there's an unknown of what those books are, and I think there's a heck of a lot more common sense and unity in what they actually would be removed than what the unknown that's being kind of leveraged for either side of this debate. And that's why I said I think that there's been incredible work done by the staff. I believe we have incredible professionals inside of our district, and I do think that that matrix is the process is very thorough and it's fine-tuned. And so as we move forward, I don't want people to be fearful. And I think that, again, I want to clip this piece when you guys outlined the entire process, because wow, how it has improved in a tremendous way. And I think for the betterment of everyone. So thank you again for that amazing work.
Thank you, Mr. Parento.
And one final thing to wrap that up. We do have a decision tree that our district media specialists use for this process that starts with their guiding question. They go through it. If yes, this. If no, this. Okay, it goes to the next step. Just to make sure that they are approaching this process with fidelity and make sure that we know exactly why these decisions are made. So we're going through that list of the 43 books that you referenced, because we, like Ms. O'Day said, we do feel like there's some human error in there. And we know that if we can backtrack that, we've already found some of those books are still available, even though they say that they were removed for not being deemed age appropriate. So whether they were available at the lower grade level and now they've moved up, we know some that have gone to other school levels where those are now being used. And I think that list is probably a lot smaller, significantly smaller than that 43. So we'll continue to work on that and make sure that that's all taken care of in terms of making sure that it's accurate.